Hello everybody, it's me, the Hero Teacher, and I welcome you all on my channel. And in this video today, we are writing a bar graph task 1 for the IELTS writing section. So I'm going to do my best to help you understand the sections and paragraphs and sentences that I write in this report to help you get a higher band. So we've got this question here, which is the graph below gives information on the number of participants for different activities at a community library in Vancouver, Canada for the period 2000 to 2020. Well, this is a similar question to an IELTS Cambridge book, but I don't remember which book. And we've got 5 lines here, 5 activities: photography club, book club, creative writing, board games, and coding workshops. So we are going to write introduction first. As you know, introduction helps the examiner understand the question. And I always urge my students not to copy the given question prompt word by word, because it's going to decrease your score and the examiner will think that you are not capable of writing authentically. So what I do instead is to write the introduction based on the question, how I understand it. So I write the introduction based on how I understand the question itself. That is why my introduction for this particular question is going to be: the line graph illustrates how many people took part in 5 different activities. Sorry for the typo. Activities at a community library in Vancouver, Canada. So I've got this capital letter, Canada, over the 20-year period. Yes, that's 20 years from 2000 to 2020. Between 2000 and 2020. So here is my introduction. Sorry for the typo, I immediately just corrected it. So here is my introduction. It may look simple, and obviously simplicity is going to help you score higher. You don't have to use all those fancy academic words going away from the question prompt. You just need to introduce what is exactly happening in the question, in the graph. So I've seen many candidates wasting their time on paraphrasing, using all those high-end vocabulary, and as a result, losing the grasp of the question, which is very important. So I don't want you to spend a lot of time on thinking of those high-end academic vocabulary words. I want you to focus on the delivery of the message. Now, so we've got our introduction ready, and it's time for overall statement. An overall statement is usually written in 2 sentences, but what these sentences are and are not is something that you should be very, very careful about. First of all, we do not use numbers in the overall statement. So you don't have to mention any of these numbers or percentages or whatever is given in the graph, because overall statement and its sole purpose is to help the examiner understand what is generally happening in the question, in the time frame that the question provides. So you avoid writing the numbers and you only focus on the general trends. Like, you need to talk about these 20 years and whatever is happening over this period, not only particular part of that period. So my overall statement is going to be overall. By the way, always start with overall. You don't have to memorize like 10 words or 10 phrases to describe your overall statement. You just need to be simple, because if you memorize again all those other phrases, your brain capacity will be overfilled with those unnecessary phrases. What we need is just to remember a few words to clearly show the examiner that this paragraph is overview. So overall, the photography club was by far the most popular activity throughout the period. Sorry for the typo again. So, period, and its membership remained relatively stable. Well, I talked about this photography club, which you can see that's the highest line over the period. And this is something important because I am given 5 lines, 5 different activities, and one in all given years is the highest, contains the highest membership or highest number of members. That is something you should include in your overall statement. That this is what overall is about. This is a trend that is true for the entirety of the period. Next, I'm going to talk about some other not interesting, like sharp changes or changes that are worth mentioning so that the examiner sees it. In contrast, I'm writing my second sentence, the most striking developments were the sharp rises in board games. Is that true? Yes, exactly. Because board games started here in 2000, around 15 members. But look at the increase. That is worth mentioning. Always pay attention to these increases and decreases because these are solid pieces of information for your overall statement. And it ended up in the second place. That is something very, very important. Board games and coding workshops. And coding workshops started with almost a 0 member, 1 probably, and by the end, it had more than 20 members. So that is a sharp increase as well. So we are talking about like 20 times increase from 1 to 20, 20 something. And coming to ball games from 15 to around 50. So it's like 3 times increase. And these are sharp increases, sharp rises. And together with a marked decline in creative writing. So because in my second sentence, I talked about 2 rising stars of the clubs, it was mandatory to also talk about what actually went down because I've got 5 lines, 2 of them stay relatively stable, 2 of them experienced sharp increases, and one which is this like black, starting from here, black rectangular shape, or like let's call it a star. So black star has this decline. So we've got 2 increases, 2 stables, but 1 decline. And it is important to write it in my overall statement because that is going to help you with your task achievement. You need to talk about the main features, which is shown in the question prompt. Now, it is time to move on to our body paragraphs. And well, we know that we need to write 2 body paragraphs, but how to write them, what to write in those body paragraphs. This is where many candidates face challenges. And hopefully, I'm going to give you a little bit of tip of writing and dividing your body paragraphs. Like, we've got these 5 lines, right? Let's look at some similarities among these lines. And we already know that photography club is the highest, right? But I don't care if it is the highest or not. I need to look for some sort of similarity that I can group the lines in, right? And upon looking, I think you already have found it yourself. Photography club and book club somehow follow the same pattern throughout the period. So they do experience some fluctuations, but not very sharp ones. And they kind of end up, if I look at here, it's like almost 60 at the beginning and 60 at the end. and this book club around 35 at the beginning and 35, 36 at the end. So they kind of remain stable despite very minor fluctuations. So this is a very good grouping point that I can use. So I am going to group photography club and book club in my first body paragraph. So they are the stable lines. And in my second body paragraph, I am going to talk about those sharp rises and sharp decline or like diminish. Okay, let's start with the first one. In 2000, the photography club already had the largest following with around 58 participants, 59 participants. Like this is an approximate number, and well, you don't lose points for guessing the number because we don't have that exact figure. And although this figure fell gradually to 52 by 2010, it subsequently recovered to reach a peak of approximately 60 in 2020. So I've basically described what happened over 20 years to this photography club, and I mentioned numbers. It's important to mention numbers, like back your ideas with numbers taken from the graph, because this is the whole idea why you write a report for task 1. Now let's move on to the other one, the book club. The book club attracted a moderate but consistent level of interest, fluctuating between roughly 30 and, well, I could say it's 36, maybe 37, right? So roughly 30 to 36 members over the two decades, right? Now, I already have mentioned a sentence. I've written a sentence about the book club. Now it is time to kind of use them both in one sentence. So I'll use both activities. It is therefore ended the period at broadly similar levels to where they had begun. And the fact that I have used past perfect makes my grammar look really good, and the examiners like it. If there is a chance of using complex grammar structure, such as perfect tenses, always do it. Always do it. And complex sentences are highly regarded by the examiners. Now, I'm done with my body 1, and now it is time to move on and talk about the remaining 3 lines. Let's go. Ball games, by contrast, show the most dramatic growth, climbing steadily from 14 participants in 2020 to 2000, to 2020 in 2010, before surging to around 50 by the end of the period. Yes. So let's look at ball games. These are the rectangles, white rectangles. Yes, it started around 14 and steadily increased to 22, 23. Like if you write 23 instead of 22, you're not going to be penalized. As I told you, these are approximate numbers because we can't see the exact number in the graph. But what happened after 2010 is something worth mentioning, because look at the increase here. This is sharp. I don't know, significant, whatever you call it, it is extreme increase, and you should mention it. Now, if you're done with board games, it is time to move on to coding workshops. Coding workshops followed similar upward trend. Yes, that's true. Oops. Ryzen from just one participant, because I see there's one participant. You could write two. One participant at the start to approximately 20 what? So let's check it a little bit. So okay, I'll call it 22, maybe 23, maybe 23, 23. Yes. Okay. I think they are the same with like board games in 2010, so I'll also call it 22. So 22 in 2020. Sorry. I'm done with coding workshops. It also increased over the period, and that was rather steady, unlike board games, which experienced a sharp increase from 2010 to 2020. And finally, the only club that declined in members, creative writing. Creative writing, meanwhile, experienced the opposite trajectory. Falling, trajectory falling from a peak of around 30 in 2005 to only 7. Again, the numbers are approximate for participants by 2020. And yes, we saw that coding workshops increased its all-time peak in 2005 with around 30 members. Then, since 2005, they had that steady decline reaching to all-time low 2020. And here it is, our line graph. I would call it 8.59 grade writing, because we have met all the task requirements. We've got 4 distinct paragraphs, and we've summarized the information, so we haven't mentioned everything year by year, which is a big mistake to write about everything, because the task literally asks you to summarize the information. We talked about main features, main increases, main decreases, and remaining stables, and we had comparisons where we found it relevant. And it's obviously more than 150 words. And there you go. We actually wrote a very high band task 1 report for a challenging line graph. I hope you liked it. So stay tuned for more such high scoring task 1 reports. Thank you very much, and see you in my other videos.